Hey everyone, welcome to episode 39 of the Soul Enchilada, where we combine faith and therapy and get shit done. Laura, what is our question for today?
Thank you, Christine. I'm so grateful to be here with our licensed therapist, bringing free counseling to you. If you've ever wondered if your relationship is codependent, listen to this question. She writes, my parents are both in their 80s and needing more help around the house and assistance with daily living. I feel obligated to help more and more. What's the difference between healthy caregiving and codependency?
I love this question. Oh my gosh. I love this question so much because I feel like, I'm having conversations about this all the time with clients. Oh, I'm so glad she asked this question, or he or they. I don't know who it is, but I love this question because it shows up in so many different examples. Like, first of all, I have a lot of moms that I work with that I would call codependent caregivers. So what is codependency? Codependency is having an imbalanced relationship with someone where you are doing for someone something they could do for themselves, either because you have a caregiving part that is trying to get your needs met of feeling useful, maybe because of guilt, maybe because of coercion. But codependency can show up whenever we are enabling someone's addiction, enabling their poor mental health, enabling their immaturity, enabling their irresponsibility, enabling them to underachieve or underfunction. Okay. And so it's like this relational imbalance where you're self-sacrificing, meeting your own needs for the sake of the other. And, there's a subtle difference between voluntarily signing up to do that, right? Meaning a lot of us sacrifice self in order to love others. And we do that voluntarily. Right? They're like, I sacrificed sleep for many years to take care of my infants. I sacrificed, my own social schedule oftentimes when I had young children so that I could put their needs first at critical junctures. That's different than codependency, which often manifests as, for instance, a mother taking care of a 25-year-old daughter, or a dad taking care of his mother, unwillingly or out of guilt. Anyway, I see it showing up. I can think of a million scenarios where I have parents who are allowing their children to underfunction by doing for them things that they should be doing themselves. And that's codependency.
I'm so glad you defined it. That was excellent. Relational imbalance. I love that. Enabling addiction, immaturity, underfunctioning. Those are great check marks. Like, am I doing that? Am I doing that? Am I doing that? I want to hone in for a second. She says, I feel obligated to help more and more. And I think that's a window into her heart, right? So that she has this part in her that she feels obligated. And so that's got to tap into motivation, desire. There's got to be something behind that, right? That there has to be a reason why she's feeling obligated. Like, is it coming from her? Is it coming from her parents? Is it coming from siblings? Is it coming from just cultural background? Like, is there somebody, or she grew up maybe where the parents always took care of the grandparents? Maybe that was passed down generationally. Like, we don't know for sure, but it made me think of, Christine, this hits close to home because I'm going to be heading to Boston to help my mom because she's having a knee surgery, a knee replacement soon. So this hits really close to home. And I don't feel obligated. I don't feel obligated to get on a plane and fly and take care of her. I see it as an opportunity. So
Mm,
obligation versus opportunity. I see it as an opportunity to like set my mom's care up on the right path. So I'll be the first one to pick her up after the surgery, bring her home, get the PT started, I'm sounding like it's going to go great, but I mean, this is my hope. My hope is I set her up for success, but I'm
mhm.
not staying for 2 weeks. I'm staying for 5 days. And then
Yeah,
I'm coming home, and then she's going to be depending on friends, family, other people. But I'm looking
yeah.
forward to it. I look at it
Mm.
as an opportunity. We're going to have more downtime. We can hang out. We can talk. We can, maybe she'll be funny because she'll be on pain medicine. I don't know.
I bet she's going to be a hoot. She's lucky to have you, Laura. You are so kind. And I love the illustration you're giving from your own life, because I do think that there's this kind of very fine line, fine tipping point between something being an obligation, meaning I'm pressuring myself to do something. I feel maybe coerced. I feel guilty. I feel like I have to, versus opportunity. I love that word that you just used, which is to say, I'm choosing to do this. And that helps. I mean, that's one way of determining that fine line between healthy caregiving, which is like, I'm signing up for this. I realize that this is a need, and I have the capacity to meet that need, and I'm not doing it out of pressure or coercion. Versus, an obligation, which can often be accompanied with resentment, right? Like, oh, I'm doing this. I mean, it would be totally different if your mom demanded that you come
Mm-hmm.
and then got angry with you if you threatened not to come and you went resentfully. I would say that would be, um, you know, enabling her, right? That would be maybe,
Mm-hmm.
bordering on codependency.
Yeah, no, she hasn't done that at all. But I can see how that plays out in a lot of families. I mean, I have women who share with me all the time that they need to step out of that small group leadership role, or they need to take things off their plate in ministry or in friendship, or because they have so many obligations, so many responsibilities for taking care of even two generations. Like I have friends who are grandmothers who are taking care of the younger generation, but then they also have parents that they're running to the doctor's office every day, or several
Mhm.
times a week, and keeping up on there. And I just see that generation, um, I wouldn't say suffering, but it's getting
Mhm.
depleted. Like their energy stores are getting used up because
Yeah.
there's not enough of them to go around. And you
Yeah.
and I are sitting in that age, we're not there yet. We're not grandmas yet. But
No, no, right? We call that the sandwich generation. They're taking care of their parents and they're taking care of their children. And that is a really challenging season, codependent or not.
mhm,
Um, right? Because it really, really leans on our caregiving parts with our kids and our caregiving parts with our parents. So
mhm,
yeah, I mean, how do you determine this? It's so tricky. I'd say, how do you determine the difference between obligation, or when you're being codependent versus when you're just doing healthy caregiving? And I think that the first thing I would say to this listener is that, I'd be curious about this listener's cultural obligations. Just like you already named, Laura, I mean, I do work with a lot of families who there is a cultural narrative around caregiving. There's this, well, I work with friends like this that struggle with, I'm the firstborn daughter and I feel obligated to take care of my parents. because my mother took care of her parents and her mother took care of her parents. And so I feel obligated to take care of my parents. And there are many cultures where that's the case, right? There are many cultures where the whole family, extended families, living in the same house together or living in
Mhm.
a collective of houses. And there is an expectation that the firstborn daughter, whether there should be that or not, is going to take care of the parents. And I think that it's important in that situation to be really clear about having conversations with parents, specifically related to her question, conversations earlier in life about what family and cultural expectations are related to caregiving
Mhm.
and where you land on that. Right? Because I think that's a really interesting challenge for our culture today. Like we have all these, like for me, I just had a conversation with my parents. Like I said, okay, do you guys have long-term care insurance? Check. Because I am not a good caregiver. And I was kind of clear with them, like, I love you guys, but if you fall or if you get Alzheimer's, I'm really encouraging you to check out that beautiful local that lovely assisted living place on the corner.
Mhm.
And I realized that's going to cost a lot of money. And I realized that I might have some caregiving, bone in my body, but you don't want me to be your caregiver. You don't want me wiping your butt, mom. Like I love you, but you don't want me to be doing that.
So that brings up a good point. Like, because your parents in their 80s? Are your folks
70s and 80s. Yeah.
okay, 70s and
My,
80s. So
yeah.
similar to this listener. Um, so how did you have the courage to bring that up? Because I think so many of us live in that assumption land. We live in that world that we just assume that we're to care provide. We're assuming that our parents will come and live with us or will move them closer to us or things like that. How did you start that conversation with them? Or for people like me, like I've never had this conversation with my husband's parents because they don't talk about anything that's they're both in their 80s, and I think they think they're going to live forever because we never talk about like what are your hopes or what are your plans for
Mhm.
this end of life, truly, right? End of
Mhm.
life planning. So how would you go about, like someone like me, or there's so many of us, I'm sure, that have parents that never talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, Laura, I know you have a lot of wisdom to offer on this. My thing is maybe because I have a history of being a pastor and then working in hospice for many years. It's like it's so critical to talk to your parents about their end of life desires, about how they want to divide their wealth or inheritance if they have any. What are their values and viewpoints governing that? um what do they see as their legacy,
Mm,
and having conversations even as much as what do you want your funeral to look like or your memorial service to look like. Right, like I have for my parents, both of them, like a service, like these are their favorite songs that they'd like sung, these are their favorite Bible verses. I know from my mom's Bible that I can just grab her Bible and she has a million things underlined so that if a pastor or anyone is trying to write a eulogy, I know about my mother's spiritual legacy, like what she would want said
mhm,
at her funeral or cremation, or, whether it's scattering ashes in another country or running to the ocean. I mean, I
mm,
think it's really important that you sit down and have conversations with your parents because, um, I mean, this is going in a totally different direction than I was planning on, but, I think it's really important that we be talking about this stuff all the time. My kids know that about me, meaning, we have our power of attorney done. We fly around, so I have a living will. I've told both of my kids what my expectations are. I'm like, I do not want to keep living if I'm not, I'm anyway. We could talk about end of life issues and have a whole nother podcast on that, which we should. But I think it's really important to have those conversations. So you bring it up. I mean, I just was camping with my parents, which was awesome. And I asked them about some of these things because I love them. I want them to take the lead on it. I don't want me and my two wonderful siblings fighting about, oh no, what do we do with mom and dad's house? Oh no, what do we do if one of them has Alzheimer's or dementia? I don't want to be waiting until a crisis before I have that conversation with my siblings. Now, I'm very fortunate because I have a relationship with my siblings. That's not true for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And so if um, I'd say sit down with whomever you can and say, hey, I value you. I love you. I want you to have a voice at the table.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say if I was running a funeral? What songs would you want played? Do you like ashes? Do you like an open casket? Do you want to live in assisted living? Would you like to be buried in Arizona or Minnesota? What are your thoughts about that, mom? What are your thoughts about that, dad? Um,
Wow, you are so brave and you are such a good counselor. Man, you are I'm taking notes and I'm writing a lot of these things down and, tucking it up in here in my brain because I'm thinking that my mom and I are going to have a lot of time and I can and ask a lot of those questions and then I can pass these on to my husband and say, "You need to have these conversations with your parents too." Yeah.
yes.
So I just
Yes.
think it's great. The clear communication, getting us back, and I'm the one who got us off track, but getting us back to the helping more. I'm just thinking she has to look inside her and say, what can she do and what can't she do? Because
Mm-hmm,
she can't give her whole life
mm-hmm,
to helping her parents because we
mm-hmm,
know that as they get older, they're going to need more and more and more. And she could
mm-hmm.
get into a slippery slope where she's going every Wednesday and then that becomes every Wednesday, Thursday and every Thursday, Friday. And like it could end up consuming her life. So I
Mm-hmm,
would just say to this listener, hey, what can you give
mm-hmm,
genuinely out of the goodness of your heart? Saying
mm-hmm.
this is an opportunity that I have this bandwidth, I have this extra, I have this margin, I have these gifts, I have these strengths, these talents. This is what I can give and this is what I can't give. And I think
Yeah.
you brought it up where clear communication is so important in our relationships
Yes,
because people might think because we're high achievers or we do certain things well, then we can do everything well.
that's right.
And we can't do everything well. So, what
Mm-hmm,
can she do and what can't she do? And then if
mm-hmm.
she has other siblings or other family friends or family members, then what can they do? And then it's
Yeah.
more of a team effort, right?
Yeah. I love that. We have to respect our own limits and acknowledge that we all are limited, right? That
Mhm.
we don't have unlimited capacity, which can be really hard for us as women, especially. But
Yeah.
we don't have unlimited capacity. And, so I have clients and friends who, for instance, have parents that I find to be pretty demanding, who will say, I want you to bring me to all of my doctor's appointments. I want you to bring me to all of my, dentist appointments because I don't want to drive or I'm nervous. And I would say to them, hey, first of all, do you have the capacity or will for that? And then, that's a great question. And then I would say to them, okay, where is the codependency here? Like, are you enabling them to do something that they really need to keep doing for themselves? You have to decide that because a lot of people don't want to face their fears or discomfort. Whether that's your own kid or whether your own parent, it's important that you are not enabling them to underfunction. Right. So, for instance, I worked with my mom this week on figuring out Uber and Lyft because right now she's struggling with dizziness. And it's not healthy for her relationship with my dad for my dad to be taking her everywhere. And so,
Mm.
okay, oh, she's a little nervous. She doesn't understand, an app. Okay, let's walk this through. I know you're 70. I know, how do we do safety? How do we decide when someone is safe? How do we negotiate transportation? But
Mhm.
I want to empower my mom, or empower my kids for
Mhm.
that matter, to challenge themselves, to leave their comfort zones and take on new tasks. And it's not healthy for people to do things for someone just because that thing makes them uncomfortable. And that's where we verge into codependency. It's like, I don't want to enable your underfunctioning, right?
Okay, so how do you back out? Like I'm thinking, I have a family friend and he's constantly helping his mom, like constantly flying there, going there, helping her, constantly talking to her. And I can see how it impacts other parts of his life. But how do you back out of that? Because it's so easy. Like we can get there. We can get to the codependency, not intentionally, right? We
Yeah.
can stumble into it or fall into it, maybe out of guilt, like what you were saying, or maybe a role that we've played for a long time. But how do you back out? Like, how do you start
Yeah. Once
untangling?
you've started over functioning or
Yeah.
moving into codependency, how do you back out once you realize, whoa, I thought I would be able to do all of this for you, but it's too much?
Yeah. How do you do that?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I've had to do that with my kids, right? Because I started out for a while. I'm embarrassed to say this. For a while I was doing all their laundry. I was making their lunches. I was, sometimes even cleaning their rooms. I'm very embarrassed. And I thankfully I had a friend who's a teacher even in second grade, and she said, "Why are you making your kids lunches? Like, they are old enough to do that. You need to empower them to make their own lunches. Why are you making your kids beds?" Okay, so she gave me a talking to. She got me a book, and she said, called Yardsticks, and she said, "Here's what your kids should be working on at each age. And right now you are being codependent," right? Thank you, Amy. Anyway, and I had to, over time, I was doing that on many different things. I was enabling my kids to underfunction,
Hmm.
for what they had the capacity to do at certain ages and stages. And I had to apologize to them. I said, "Hey, I did this with laundry." I said, "Hey, you guys," they were like 15 and 16. I said, "I have been doing your laundry. I'm really embarrassed. I do not want, I've been doing that because it's easier for me to do it. And I like the
Hmm.
laundry getting done. And I'm realizing that I am not equipping you guys to go out into the world and be your own human beings. And so I need to backtrack, and I'm going to empower you guys to do your own laundry." And we had a session on it, and we all went downstairs. We learned about bleach, we learned about separating colors and whatever. And then by whatever, 14 and 15, my kids started doing that and doing it on their own. So sometimes, in the case you just gave the example of, like, okay, I have a husband maybe, or a wife that's over functioning with her parent, with the in-laws or whatever. Well, that's sitting down with that in-law and saying, "Hey, you know what? I love you, and I've been working really hard to meet your needs. And I'm realizing that in doing that, there have been some ways that I've enabled you or disempowered you to be able to, do these certain things for yourself. And what I'd like to do is help you find some resources, right? And I'm going to empower you to use those resources, because I want you to feel confident and independent, and not feel like you have to rely on your daughter or your son to do things for you that you really have access to resources to do for yourself."
Oh,
Now,
that's
there are
so
certain,
good.
yeah, I mean, there are certain situations where they don't have access to those resources, and that's different, right?
Right.
But
But nowadays you do. We do. We have so many resources. I'm just thinking we have handyman, we have people that can come in and provide nursing care for a couple hours a day, or we have cleaning services, we have repair services, we have Uber, like you said, we have
visiting angels, all
yes.
kinds of all kinds of people, and churches too. Churches, synagogues, temples all have their own resources, community resources. And
And
so
that
when we do things for people, yeah, go
that
ahead.
feels like a
Sorry.
wraparound love support. Like that feels healthy to
Mhm.
me. To say,
Mhm.
I'm not going to get all my needs met from one individual that I
Mhm.
have this codependent relationship with. I'm going to look and see how else can I get my needs met from a village, or a community, or think about all the different connections
Mhm.
then are created by reaching out. Instead of just having one person meeting all your needs, you could have 7 or 8 people or more helping.
That's right.
Yeah, this
That's
has
right.
been so helpful, Christine. I am excited. I think you define so well codependency. You've given us a lot of great resources, ways to clearly communicate. I feel braver and more confident talking
Yeah.
to you. I'm going to have those hard conversations. I'm going to
Yeah.
have them.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good. Good. Your overfunctioning promotes their underfunctioning. Tough love, girlfriends and boyfriends and whoever's listening, right? A little tough love. Yeah, to encourage you. Yes. And thank you for this awesome conversation. We went in so many great directions. And that is episode 39 of the Soul Enchilada.